Welp, better late than never I suppose. Persona 5 Strikers is now out on PS4, Nintendo Switch, and PC via Steam, and I played it. So let's talk about it, I guess. For the uninitiated, this is yet another console Persona spin-off in the vein of Persona 4 Arena, Arena Ultimax, the dancing games, and the two Persona Q games on 3DS. This time, Koei Tecmo, specifically Omega Force of Dynasty Warriors fame, has taken the reins on this particular project in collaboration with Atlus, delivering a standalone sequel to Persona 5 but with an action flavor and more frenetic energy than its turn-based brethren. As far as the story goes, the basic gist of it is it takes place about half a year after the events of the original Persona 5, and involves the Phantom Thieves being central suspects of another mysterious incident involving mental shutdowns, except this time they're occurring all over Japan instead of just Shibuya. You, as the protagonist, work together with a police inspector in Kyoto named Zenkichi, while going on a road trip across the country, stealing the hearts of corrupted individuals who are forming their own jails in the metaverse, where they rule as monarchs and steal the desires of common folk around the area with the help of shadows. You are also accompanied this time by an AI companion named Sophia, who is essentially the plot's deus ex machina who serves as plot convenience for the entire team and as useful as the narrative dictates. Also, she'll come off as either very adorable or very insufferable, depending on your preferences in personality or voice, so just keep that in mind. To start with the positives, damn, this is like a really good fusion of Persona and action RPGs. Being an Omega Force game, it shares a lot in common with the combat and structure of a Dynasty Warriors title. If you've played games like Dynasty Warriors, Warriors Orochi, or the multitude of licensed games using other franchises, the basic gameplay will feel incredibly familiar. You got your light attack button, your heavy attack button, chaining them together to make combos, and when you chain more combos, more shadows will be able to be defeated in more swift succession because of your combo chaining skills, where you chain combos into more combos. Combos. Where the elements of Persona come in is by tapping that right bumper, which lets you summon your equipped Persona in real time while it freezes your surroundings, giving you the opportunity to select any physical or magical skill from their respective command menu, while the area of effect for said attack is displayed when selecting said skill alongside the associated health point or skill point cost. There are 4 people controllable in your party at one time that you can select before entering each palace, and in addition to having physical attacks that you can unlock more of skill tree style by using the characters more often and gaining experience, each have their own persona with unique skills that have varying effects and specialize in particular elemental skills. However, just like in Persona 5, while your other party members have one set persona, you, as the protagonist, or Joker, have access to a unique distinguishing ability called the Wild Card, which gives you immediate access to multiple personas, which you switch between with the D-pad. Like in Persona 5, the Velvet Room returns for stuff like Persona Fusion. Persona collecting is considerably simpler, with randomized drops in the form of masks that you can just pick up after specific enemies are defeated. By taking these collected personas into the Velvet Room just like in the main series, you can fuse them and add them to an ever-growing compendium of summonable demons with different attributes and skills. It's virtually just like Persona 5 or any other numbered entry in the series, but streamlined and simplified to fit the pacing of what an action game more familiar to what Koei Tecmo typically does gameplay-wise, albeit still a satisfying system nonetheless and no less addicting than it was before. Progression is where the game starts trying to deviate and streamline the traditional Persona structure to fit the smaller scale of its story and faster pace, and this may be met with differing reactions depending on what you play a Persona game for. For starters, the calendar's appearance in the game is purely aesthetic. Since the game's story takes place over the course of just 2 months instead of the full year that numbered Persona games since Persona 3 have set themselves against, the social simulation and time management mechanics of mainline Persona have been almost completely omitted. You are given as much time during the day as you need to do stuff like fulfill requests, do story-sensitive missions, or buy various commodities and gear from the various shops in each of the cities you stop at during your road trip. This also extends to how you progress through the game's set of dungeons, this time in the form of jails instead of Persona 5's palaces. These jails are compartmentalized of some closed-off arena-like areas where you fight shadow hordes in a very Musou-style fashion, and you can use the environment to your advantage, while the rest of it comprises of larger areas that emphasize more elements present in Persona 5's palaces such as platforming segments, puzzle solving, and stealth sections, including the return of the third eye feature, where you can scan the coming area of any known shadows available to ambush, so a palace's awareness meter isn't raised by you or your party caught by another shadow in the open. However, since unlike Persona 5, the amount of time you have to complete said dungeons is a lot less restrictive due to the omission of time management and due to the placement of multiple checkpoints at many intervals throughout said dungeons, you can stop at a save point, leave the dungeon, go back to the real world with no passage of time whatsoever, go to the many shops around town with HP or SP related items or with different equipable gear for your party, in addition to the additional items and weapons you can get from Sophia's built-in shop, buy and equip said perks, and then return to the dungeon completely geared up, and you'll still have the same amount of time left to complete it as you did when you first entered it. This doesn't even barely scratch the surface of the many systems at work that are also exploitable through the lack of actual time passage, like the bond system, which is like a mixture of the Confidant system for Persona 5, but with a sort of skill tree setup, where each time you engage in a story-sensitive team bonding event like conversing with your team outside of the metaverse or lounging at places like restaurants while on assignment, you can build up your bond meter, which can be leveled up and gives you more bond points that you spend towards perks you can obtain when you explore dungeons, like increased physical and persona skill attributes or party buffs, or whatever else that will ease your time during combat and make it more comfortable. Again, completely unaffected by time due to the lack of time management that's usually present in numbered Persona entries. These changes aren't small, and are obviously done to service the fact that Strikers is nowhere near as long as Persona 3, 4, or 5. In fact, it's probably way closer in length to the original PS1 games. People expecting this to be more along the lines of a mainline Persona game in terms of density of content and length will inevitably be disappointed, since that's how a lot of the marketing kind of presented it. It is not that, and if you're okay with that, then you're still gonna have a good time, because this is still a pretty deep game gameplay-wise for a mere spin-off in a franchise that had its fair share of those already. And that brings me to a topic that comes with its pros and cons all on its own. The million-dollar question. Should you play Persona 5 before jumping into Persona 5 Strikers? Obviously, since the game has been advertised, mostly in Japan, as a story sequel to that game, the question inevitably had to be asked for a lot of reasons, and the answer, in my humble opinion, is no. Kind of. Maybe it's complicated. For starters, you can completely ignore Royal's extra content. There's virtually nothing of substance from stuff like Royal's extra school semester or the extra characters like Kasumi or Haruki that get even remotely addressed in Strikers. You only need the context of the original Persona 5 that was released back in 2017. And that brings up another question. What about those people who don't have a PS4? Because I know you're out there. This game is available on both a console that has become notorious for having as much Persona 5 promo material as humanly possible without any form of the game itself, and PC, whose only other Persona game outside this one is Persona 4 Golden. And I guess BlazBlue Cross-Side Battle 2. Obviously, neither platform has seen an official release of either Persona 5 or Royal, since both games are exclusive to PlayStation consoles like virtually the rest of the main Persona series. So what do you do in that scenario? How do you approach this game? Well, for starters, for the more tenacious lot of you with beefy, and I mean Arby's, we have the goddamn meats level of beefy computers, there is an option to emulate the PlayStation 3 version of the original Persona 5 through a popular PS3 to PC emulator known as RPCS3. On my RTX 2060 and 9th Gen i7 equipped laptop, it runs pretty smoothly, and the modding scene is pretty neat. It's the whole reason I even started playing the game on PC, given I already have a PS4 copy of both P5 and Royal that I got near launch both times. A word of warning though is that PS3 emulation is considerably harder than most other older consoles due to its super unorthodox console architecture, meaning it's super CPU and GPU intensive. You really need good hardware in order for a lot of these games to even be playable, hence why it's not an option for a lot of people. For the rest of you, I honestly don't think Persona 5 is as much of a necessity as the marketing or other people around the fandom might tell you. The story's references to Persona 5's events are mostly in pretty broad strokes, stuff like comparing the obvious similarities to jails and palaces, the cast reflecting on how long they've known each other, stuff like that. However, if you have played Persona 5, the story does noticeably leave itself open to drawing parallels between the two, especially given the similarities between some of the monarchs and that game's palace rulers, in addition to some genuine moments of fanservice for particular characters. Unfortunately, this lack of ties to the previous game's story does come at the expense of its characters, specifically the returning Phantom Thieves. They really don't develop over the course of the game and aren't really taken to nearly as many high points of emotional or psychological maturity as they could have been given the game's positioning as a narrative sequel to Persona 5. Unfortunately, the story also to an extent suffers from the storytelling problem that's plagued the other console Persona spin-off games like the 2 Arena games and the 2 Q games. Archetypal writing. Now, I could honestly do a whole video on how the more simplified character writing of the Persona spin-off games has bastardized particular characters and left them as single trait husks of their mainline counterparts. And to be fair, this is a problem that at times felt like it permeated throughout Persona 5 itself with particular characters, but it only feels accentuated in this game. There's a singular character trait that most, if not all, characters in the game just kind of roll with in terms of how they act around the protagonist or as part of the team. An's the blonde bimbo, Ryuji's the other blonde bimbo who has a foul mouth, Yusuke's hungry and appreciates art, Makoto is Courtney from Total Drama Island, Haru's the adorably sadistic one, Futaba can shut the fuck up. I get why this was done. With a 40 to 50 hour campaign, there isn't really that much time you can give to fleshing out these characters as you can in a 100 plus hour game like Persona 5. And you also have to accommodate for the fact that you need to cater the game to people who haven't played Persona 5 since it's also coming out on Switch and PC, 2 platforms that don't have the game itself. So you can't really risk developing them substantially further without alienating those who haven't gotten a sense of their previous arcs in the preceding game. It's just that I don't really think Persona 5S is as much of a sequel as it is hyped up to be. The story plays it pretty remarkably safe, repeating a lot of the beats from Persona 5's narrative, and the characters aren't given that much more to do or reflect on, likely to avoid alienating those coming to the game from other venues, like Super Smash Bros. On Switch or Persona 4 on PC, who have next to no knowledge on Persona 5 or Persona in general. As a result, it's a perfectly fine, standalone addition to the pantheon of Persona spin-offs that will, on a gameplay level, definitely tick off all the boxes for people looking for Persona to be injected with a more fast and bombastic pace reminiscent of action games, but it comes at the cost of a meandering and honestly not that great story, which is unfortunately a repeat of a problem many of the spin-offs and side games have in this series. Persona 5 Strikers is great for what it is, but whether its deviations from the formula work for you is all a matter of preference and what you look for most when playing any of these games. As a game itself though, I personally think it's worth your time and money, even if you aren't absolutely well versed in the series like veteran players are. But for veteran players who have played Persona 5, particularly PS4 owners, this is a definite buy if you want more out of your experience with the Phantom Thieves after falling in love with them the first time.